Okay, so today's topic is operating system deployments. And guys, can any one of you tell me like, what do you know about operating system deployment?
I never been experienced on so not sure. Maybe OS related I can say, not data plan from this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sure. Anil, Sai, or Amar, anyone worked on OSD or at least know what OSD is? I mean to say the operating system deployment is. Yeah.
I know partially, Manor. It is just the installation of operating system based on the deploying it on the end user devices. There are specific task sequences which goes sequentially in order and are deployed. So first the operating system gets deployed, and there are a couple of task sequences which follow behind one after the other. That's sequential.
Mm-hmm. Good, Amar. Thanks for that. Sai, you were able to say something?
I've seen only the image deployment, Manoj, nothing more than that.
Okay. Image and deployment. Anything else? Anil, have you seen or heard about operating system deployment in your company?
The same network deployment via network.
Okay, so deployment via network. Okay, fine. So yeah, so all of you are correct. Like installation of OS is correct. Deploying to the end user computers. Okay, deploying image, deploying via network. So all of you are trying to define operating system deployment in one way or the other, right? So let's go step by step. Just give me a minute. Guys, are you getting any background noise?
Yes,
No,
Manoj.
Okay, okay,
I'm getting.
fine, cool, thank you. So let's start with the basic thing. Like, okay, so say suppose if you want to install operating system, right? So how do you install operating system manually?
booting CD image stored CD.
So by default you use CD or DVD and
Yeah,
install, right? You use CD or DVD to install the operating system. Now,
yeah.
along with operating system, so once you install it, so if your machine is a Dell machine, okay, it's a Dell laptop, and you're using a Windows 7 CD or DVD to install it, or Windows 10, right? So after that, what will happen? You need to install the drivers, because with the help of by default with the operating system, some drivers will come, but those drivers are generic drivers, are not specific to Dell, right? Most of the times those are way generic. So what do? You go to the Dell website and then download and install the drivers, right? So let me put step by step. So you have the OS layer, and then you have the drivers, right? So after you install drivers, so this you download and install from the vendor website. Now, so once the OS is installed, drivers are installed, what's next? You need to have,
And the software.
yes, softwares, right? So if it is your home computer, you'll have some, by default you will install some softwares. But if you're talking about corporate environment, right? So in a corporate environment, there are something called core applications. That means every single user uses these applications. Like by default, everybody needs to have .NET framework, Silverlight, Visual C++, right? And on top of it, something like Adobe Reader, or maybe even Office 2016, right? So these are the some of the core applications which every single user needs to have on their machine. On top of this, we have some optional, or I can say line of business applications, LOB applications, right? So these are very specific to a department, very specific to a group of individuals who work on, maybe their specific department is there into IT department, or they're into HR or finance or something else. Even in within IT department, they are into developers, or they are testers, or they are the infra support guys. So based on that, what will happen, the kind of applications that you install are very specific to their department, right? So you need to install some LOB applications. For example, if there are some mechanical designers are there, okay, you have AutoCAD for them. Or if there are some finance guys, you have accounting team who requires Tally, right? And then there is a different team who works on SAP, right guys? And for example, if they are IT infra support guys, maybe they require some ticketing tool like Remedy, right? So these are very specific. Other guys like developers don't need Remedy ticketing tool on their machine, right? So similarly, so each individual or each team requires a different set of applications, so which you need to install on top of this core applications, right? Now you have OS layer, you have drivers, you have softwares. What next? User data. Say suppose you are migrating him from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So on Windows 7, he had some under his documents. He has some, some of his documents are there on the desktop. He has some files, and then maybe even on the C drive or D drive, he has his own PST files, right? The Outlook PST files. Like that, he might be having some 10 different things on his machine. All this user data you need to migrate to the Windows 10 device, right? So because while migrating from Windows 7 to Windows 10, there's no something like an upgrade path, right? So say suppose there's no upgrade path, and what you are doing is uh, completely formatting his machine and then giving him with a latest operating system, say suppose, right? In that case, what you will do, you have to store this user data somewhere, migrate him onto the Windows 10 operating system, and then put his data back. So there is some user data is also required. So backup and restore. Just 1 minute here. I'm having a lot of disturbance in the background. Just give me a minute. So anything else guys on the operating system deployment layer? So you have the OS, drivers, core applications, LOB applications, and user data. Anything else comes to your mind? Nope. Okay. So now how do you install all this? If say suppose you have to do manually, let's think about that. So okay, using a CD DVD, you have installed the operating system, then you download. So the installing the operating system itself will take, can I assume safely that it will take like minimum of 40 minutes to 1 hour? And downloading the drivers and then installing them from the vendor website installing them from the vendor website. So the downloading and installing, can I take something like 20 to 30 minutes here minimum? Then all installing all the core applications. So assuming that you have all of them already downloaded and ready. So to install this again, I can take another 20 to 30 minutes. Then installing some specific applications. This will also take 20 to 30 minutes, right? Finally, user data backup. User data backup may go from 30 minutes to 1 hour depending on the size. If he has 1 GB or 2 GB or 5 GB, we don't know how much of user data is there. So taking a backup before doing the OS deployment and after restoring it back after the OS deployment, right? You can take somewhere around 30 minutes to 1 hour. So the time involved here is, if you take even the minimums, it's like how much? 1 hour and then 1.5 hour. So maybe almost like 2 hours, 10 minutes or 2.5 hours. So that's what it is taking, right? Now, not only the time here, so if I just take the time, so it is somewhere around 2.5 to 3.5 hours for this entire setup to complete, right? So not only just the time here, think about the kind of complexity involved here. Now you have 10 machines, okay, and 10 machines, not all are of same hardware model. Then we are talking about downloading drivers of different hardware models and installing based on identifying which model, which machine is which model, and then installing accordingly, right? So there is a complexity there. So for each, if there is a Dell machine, you will go to the Dell website and download. Then you have HP machine, then you have Lenovo, right? So for each machine, you have to check the exact model, and then accordingly you have to download the drivers and install it. So there is a complexity involved there. Similarly, okay, let's assume, okay, core applications are same, because core applications are same across, so there's no complexity there. Just if you have the binaries, just go ahead and install them. That is pretty simple. But what about optional applications or LOB applications? So to each department, now out of these 10 laptops that you have, you need to identify which the user belongs to which particular department, and accordingly what are his preferred applications or what are his standard application that he needs, right? Accordingly you have to install it. So there is again another bit of complexity. Now coming to user data. So taking a backup and restoring the user data. If you don't know what exactly needs to be backed up, because each user will follow his own way of storing the data. Somebody stores the data under his profile only. Some people store data on D drive or the data drive, right? And some people store everything on the not at one single location, that is spread across on their local disk. And also there are multiple file formats, right? There are some his personal videos and personal photos are also stored on the company laptop. Then how do you identify what is personal and what is official data, and then what data is really required to capture? So there is again some part of complexity involved, right? So now when we are talking about, though it looks like there are some 4 or 5 simple steps, but when we are getting into the granular level, it is becoming more and more complex and more time consuming, right? So how to address that? So that's one part. We'll go there. So before that, how frequently you need to actually deploy OS, and why do you need to deploy OS? So as I've already explained, when your company is migrating from one operating system to the other operating system, so that's when you migrate, that's when you use this OSD. Okay, so OSD is used like when migrating from, say, suppose Windows XP to Windows 7 or to Windows 10. So typically on the client side, even you can use OSD even for the servers. You can build 2003, 2008, or 2012 or 2016 servers using Sccm. That's always there. But to be very honest with you, Sccm OSD is not that popularly used for server operating system deployments. People use it, but there are other tools to build servers, and most of the times people use OSD for client operating system migrations. So this is one thing, and the other thing is like whenever a new employee joins, right? So when you are doing onboarding process or hiring someone, so what you will do, so you are giving a new laptop or new desktop to them, right? So even in that case, you're going to do all this process like installing the OS, then the drivers, and finding which applications are mandatory for him, right? So that's again the other process. What you, at least maybe in that case you will not have any user data backup and restore. You don't need to do that because they are just new users. They don't have any user they don't have any user data earlier, right? So that's another case where you would require OSD, that is like a new hire. So anything else, guys? Can you give me any other example where you need OSD? Anyone? When do you think you need to build the operating system?
These two are majorly used if it is, something on Mars. Um, Otherwise, not much area, because in case a laptop is crashed, for that sometimes we might use Sccm depending on the numbers. Else, most of the time it will go as manual installation. So,
Yep. So that's the third scenario I was expecting. So the third scenario is when there is a crash of uh, when there is a crash of OS, right? Or if there is a virus affected, right? And you wanted to isolate the machine first and then rebuild the machine, right? In such cases, also you require operating system deployment, right? So whether it is from SCCM or manual or sometimes uh, even using SCCM, there are other ways of deploying. So we'll discuss of that, right? So, but these are the top scenarios when you'll use OSD. Anything else, Sai, Manju, or Anil? Any other scenario comes to your mind?
No, the last one, which I written, that one I was about to say.
Ah, okay, perfect. Okay, now, so what are the different deployment methods? So now we know that OS deployment, okay, these are the steps in OS deployment, and then we know how much time it will take if you are doing it manually, right? So even before going to the SCM OSD, I just wanted to give a bit of intro here, right? After that, we also know that when exactly we do operating system deployment, right? So what are the ways of deploying? What are the different ways of deploying? So one we all know, which is CD or DVD or USB, right? Even using USB, yes, you can do. And then the other one is PXC. How many of you heard about this PXC or maybe network boot? Or if you,
I do this network boot.
sorry, Anil?
Doing this network boot for installation OSD deployment.
Hmm. So do you know what happens in network boot? Anyone?
it boots from the network. If the PXE is enabled, then it boots from the network. The uh, the operating system is loaded.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there will be a image stored path will be mapped over a network, and when it boots, it communicates to the over network to that point of that path, and then it boots, and then the control will be there or the server end, then it will be keep on booting and loading the, whatever it requires as per
Perfect,
the image.
perfect. Right, guys. So all of you are right. So when you say network boot, exactly. What you'll do is you have something called boot image, right? You're all saying booting. So what is booting? So you'll have a boot image. So that boot image, as Manju rightly said, so first of all, what we'll do, we'll have it on a server. You can call it as a PXE server, or you can have it on WDS server, or even in case of SCM, you can have it on the PXE enabled distribution point. So wherever you have this boot image, so what will happen when you hit this F12? to do a network boot, it will contact the Pixie server and it will download the boot image. It boots, the machine boots, and after it boots, then it will go with the actual operating system installation. So we'll definitely get into the details of it and step by step what is the workflow, what happens after what. So that we'll get in detail. But just to understand the difference between CD DVD and the network boot is like CD DVD is pretty physical. Directly you're inserting a CD and installing the operating system, whereas Pixie boot or the network boot. So Pixie is nothing but pre-boot execution environment, right? Pre-boot execution environment is called as PXE, Pixie. So that means even before booting, pre-boot execution environment, executing even before the booting stage, right? So either in that way you can do it. So you can use WDS, which is Windows Deployment Services, or the network boot, right? So this is one way. And in the above deployment method, I mentioned something like USB. So have you ever built a machine using USB?
Yes, Manoj.
Yes, bootable pen drive loading from the external media.
Perfect, perfect. So using USB, you have used a bootable pen drive, right? Kind of, and which will boot the machine. And after that, if it is connected to the network, corporate network, automatically it will start installing the operating system. That's one way. The other way is
Yes,
even if it is
the
offline. Yeah, Manju, go ahead.
sometime ghost images using a third-party tool.
So ghost images on the USB is the,
Over the net, on the over the network, there will be some link they will generate, and that link will be I mean it will generate to the machine, and like something like they will click on connect and then start taking boot and loading the OS via ghost server.
true, true, correct. So along with that, so when you're using USB devices, what I was trying to say is there are two ways of doing that. Either you can just have a boot image on the USB, right, and making it as a bootable USB. So it will first load the boot image from the USB. After that, if you are connected to the corporate network, it will contact the SCM server or the Ghost server or whichever the servers that you have, and from there it will actually download the ghost image instead of the SCM. In case of SCM, we have Vim image. It will download and it will install, right? So that's one way. The other one is if the user is completely remote, okay, he is not even connected to the corporate network. So you can still have a USB with the complete image, not only just the boot image. It will boot and then it will even have the actual operating system image. It will have the drivers, it will have the applications, so everything included in just one USB. You can connect to that USB and he'll get the entire corporate image built in. Right? So we'll see how to do that as well. Okay. So, okay, we are done with the deployment methods. So I think there's one little part I've missed here in these layers, which is the custom settings, because we are talking about the corporate images, right? So there are something called custom settings. So guys, can you give me any couple of examples of custom settings?
Uh, it must be some group policy setting.
The group policy settings are coming from the group policy from the Active Directory. Anything which should be part of the OS deployment process or part of the image itself.
Language,
Okay, language,
Display settings.
display settings. So can you be more elaborate? What do you mean by display settings?
Is it include? I'm not sure, but the brightness, power management. I mean the
Resolution.
resolution.
Hmm. So resolution and power management and
And OS is belongs to 32-bit or 64-bit.
okay, so okay, that is already covered here as part of OS layer, whether you are installing a 32-bit OS or a 64-bit OS. That is part of this OS layer. Architecture is part of here. So as part of custom settings, for example, in corporate images, you must have seen they will have a standard background, Have you observed that standard background and screensavers? Your company will have their own screensaver.
Yeah, I thought it will be from some domain. They will be putting that screen or flash kind of setup from AD. I thought all the time.
You can do it, yes, you're right. You can do it even from AD, you can still do it, or you can have it as part of the image. And while you're deploying that image, right? So you'll get the standard background and screensaver by default, even not even from the AD. So you can do it from both the ways. You're right. And anything else like services? So on every machine you'll have standard services, right? So some of the services needs to be disabled, some of them needs to be enabled, some needs to be changed to automatic, some needs to be put it in manual, right? So the services, you know what I mean, right? I'm talking about these services. Services.msc. I'm talking about these services. When you go to the services.msc, you'll have so many services on your machine, right? So some of these services might be slowing down your boot process. So you don't want them to be starting immediately. So you'll say instead of automatic, you'll put automatic delayed start, right? Similarly, some of the services you just want them to be disabled, right? So those are very specific to a company. So they will ask like, okay, I want these services, Windows services to be disabled, these services to be, automatic delayed start. So like that, those are also kind of customizations. So anything else comes to your mind? So when you're talking about Windows 10, how many of you have used Windows 10?
Uh, Started using and already a bit experience, not much.
Hmm. So you must have seen the start screen layout, the start screen. So when you click on the start, you have a start screen layout, right? So when you click here, you have a start screen layout.
Yeah, this is there in Windows 8 also. From there it is started.
Yeah, from there it started, but now they have included, they have this both a mixture of Windows 7 start menu programs, and then you have the start screen layout as well. So both
Yeah,
together,
Cortana.
right? So this one, when we have both together, so my question here is, what customers will ask now is to have a custom start screen layout. They will say that, okay, I want to have my office products here. I want to have a group name called as office products, and I want to have here Excel, my PowerPoint, Word, and the most of the times whatever I use, like your Outlook, right? And then I need to have one more group saying browsers, and I want to have all the browsers there, like Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, and then your Google Chrome kind of. So similarly, what and all they frequently use, if they want to have those on their, on their start screen, so customizing the start screen layout, right? So if you keep on giving a list, so the custom settings are endless. So I've even heard some of my customers asking like, can you customize Cortana to whenever we just say, hey Cortana, raise a ticket. When the end user says raise a ticket, or automatically it should connect with their local help desk solution and raise a ticket. So customers asks are endless. So all this comes under customizations. So different customers has come up with different things. Some of them are possible, some of them are not possible. Straight away, maybe you need to make the customer understand that it requires additional efforts to create a separate PowerShell script or third-party things. It is not by default which comes, right? So sometimes it is pretty easy that all you need to do is just go to a register and make a small change from 1 to 00 to 1. Or sometimes it is like a little bit of process is involved when you're customizing the start screen layout and other things, right? And sometimes it is way too complex, like the example that I gave, like say, hey Cortana, raise a help desk ticket, and immediately it has to connect to the local help desk solution and raising a ticket. That's very complex, way too complex, right? Then so depending on the kind of requirements your customer has, so you need to make them understand if it's not possible. Otherwise you have to either create PowerShell scripts or VB scripts and then include them as part of the OS imaging process. But just this is just to give you a fair bit of idea like what kind of custom settings will be there, and it is an integral part of operating system deployment, right guys? So next, let's go with what are the different types or formats of images that you have worked on. So I'll give a couple of them. Like you all must have seen .iso, which is a self-bootable, right? So what are the different image types that you have seen, the formats?
Image format.
Image format. So you mean to say .img?
Yes,
So with which tool you have used .img?
that Nero software will be there. No? So with that, it will be we will have an option to save as image.
Great. Okay. So any other formats, guys?
Probably all the time I say this this either it will be ISO, either it will be IM.
No, you said Ghost, right? So you're using Ghost images. So what is the format of
Yeah,
Ghost?
that is GHT something I think. Dot GHT. That is again Ghost software should be there,
Mm-hmm.
and that will we will not have any backup over there locally. Is it will be existing from the server itself directly. Just we will that connectivity will be there, and some individual way different type different procedure is there when just to install. So not
Yep.
normally next finish something like that.
Yep. Sure. So yeah, you're right. So Ghost images, if you want to deploy Ghost images, you need to have the Ghost infrastructure. That's true. Any other image format that you have worked on, guys? Okay. So have you worked on WIM, WIM, Windows image format? Anyone if you have worked on this?
I am not.
Okay. Okay. So the kind of imaging uh, before Vim existed, okay, the kind of imaging or the kind of different formats that we have before this Windows imaging format has released, right? So most of them are sector-based images. So when I say sector-based images, those are like you know you're cloning. Say suppose you have one Windows XP machine, okay, Windows XP machine on a Windows XP on a HP or maybe a, a light book, okay, on a HP Elite book. Now, using Ghost or any other sector-based images, what they used to do is they used to capture the image from an existing machine, okay, where first they install Windows XP and then they have HP, they have the HP drivers installed, everything, and while capturing, they used to make sure that either it is all the drivers are also captured, or they'll try to make it as much generic as possible by removing those drivers and all that. They do a sysprep, and then finally they used to capture an image. Now uh, this image, when you wanted to deploy to another machine like Dell machine or other machine, so sometimes it might not work because it is very specific to the drivers as well. It is very specific to the hardware because that's what is called cloning, right? So those are kind of a sector-based images what we used to use earlier. Right, but after that, when we moved into a Vim format, which is a file-based image, wherein instead of capturing the entire image as such, the image from a C drive or D drive altogether, and applying it onto the end user machine. So what we are doing here is we are capturing the files. So what are the files in C program files, or what are the files you have in the C Windows? Right. So individual files are captured, and then the files are written on the end user machine, the other machine when you are doing a deployment. And here we have a concept called single instance storage. Have you heard about single instance storage? So what does the single instance storage means is, say suppose you have a particular file, okay, a particular DLL file is there under C Windows, okay, under a folder. then the same DLL might be again repeating somewhere else under say Windows System 32, or maybe you have the same DLL somewhere else on the same machine. So instead of copying it 2 times or 3 times, what it will do, it will just copy it once, right? And then it will refer saying that, okay, whenever I have to extract it back, I have to put it under 3 different places. So let me give you a clear example. Like you have one abc.exe, okay, or DLL. So this DLL, say suppose it is under 3 different locations. You have it under C folder 1, okay, you have abc.dll, then you have C Windows System 32, there you have this abc.dll, and again you have it under somewhere C Windows, directly under C Windows you have this abc.dll. Now in case of the ghost image or such kind of sector based image, what will happen is it is capturing, and this is my capture machine, right? This is my reference machine, so it is capturing the entire image. It is not capturing individual files, it will be capturing entire image, right? So thereby the size of the image will be more, whereas in the file based image or the Vim format, where we have single instance storage, so what it will do, it will just capture once abc.dll. It will only capture only one file abc. It will not capture 3 times. It will capture only once abc.dll. Then it will have something called pointer. So it will say that, okay, I have to capture abc.dll. Then the pointer here is, while I'm restoring it back, while I'm going to deploy this image onto any other machine, there I have to create C folder 1 and copy this particular abc.dll there. Similarly, I have to create C under C Windows System 32. I have to copy this, under C Windows System 32, I have to copy this abc.dll. So like that, it will have all the pointers there, but it will not copy. It will not copy the abc.dll thrice. It is just copying it once, and after when you're deploying it, it is copying back the same file to 3 different locations. So that way, what we are doing here is we are reducing the size. So the compression ratio is higher when you compare with ISO or image format or the ghost format. The compression ratio is very higher. So that's why the image size will be very less when you look at Vim image and compare it with ISO image. Guys, am I making sense here? Do you have any questions here?
No, Manoj.
Okay.
How how that size will get reduced? Uh, when they have any setup, something like that to do this?
No. If you understand the basic concept here, for example, abc.dll is like some, I'm just giving a bare example, okay, bare minimum example. Like say suppose this is of some 10 KB file, okay. So if you're copying that 3 times, it is becoming 30 KB. Whereas in Vim format, if you're just copying it once, so you're just using only 10 KB, right? So thereby the size is getting reduced. You're getting that point, getting my point.
Yeah, getting, but
So
not able to analyze.
no. So what I'm saying is, in a sector-based image, the particular file, any particular file, it's not only one DLL, any file for that matter, is captured as is it was there on the reference machine. So even if the particular file is called some 15 times, 20 times, even if it is there on your machine, 10, 15 locations, it is capturing every single time. So the size is bigger. Whereas when you're going to a Vim format, it is identifying, okay, this particular file is there on 10 different locations. Let me not copy this 10 times. Let me copy only once and put it on under that Vim under the Vim folder. Let me just copy it once. Then have a pointer file saying that, okay, this for DLL file, I need to copy it back into 10 different locations. So this way it is only copying it once. So instead of copying it 10 times, like 10 into 10 KB, like 100 KB, it is only utilizing 10 KB of size. Thereby it is compressed. It is kind of compressed because of the single instance of storage. Right, Manju?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Got it.
and how it does that, that is the design of a Vim format. That's how it happens. So you are not doing anything extra. You don't need to tell it like, okay, copy this once or copy this 10 times. You don't need to do that. The moment you are trying to capture it, that is by design. That's how Vim works in the background. So you don't need to do any manipulation here. So by default, when you are trying to capture an image using Vim format, this is how it is going to capture it: file-based image and single instance storage, right? So let's proceed further. Now we know the manual way. So you heard Amar, I guess you heard Amar saying task sequences, right? So what exactly is the task sequence, Amar? Any idea?
Basically, after deploying the operating system, we have certain sequences of drivers or settings which goes sequentially. Like the drivers gets installed, then there might be a pointer to install certain agents. Uh, could be an Sccm agent, client agent, or any other agents. Likewise, all the other settings goes sequentially in the task sequence.
Mm-hmm. So why not OS part of the task sequence? Why do we need to run this task sequence after OS? Why is it not part of the task sequence?
Then the image file would be quite heavy um, if
Mm-hmm.
we are doing it within the image.
No, I'm not saying doing it within the image. I'm saying, can we have operating system deployment as also as part of the task sequence? The operating system
I'm
image,
not sure.
can that be part of
I'm
task?
not sure. Yeah, could be a possibility, but
Okay,
I'm not sure. I've not come across.
sure. Okay, so let me tell you. So what will happen here is like, so whenever you want to build a machine, so first thing you do is you format it, okay, and after you format that, you install OS, install drivers, you install core apps, you install LOB apps. We just discussed all these, right? You install LOB apps, you install the custom settings, you configure the custom settings, and then you'll install the patches, Microsoft patches, whatever the recent patches that are released, right? Finally, you restore the user data. So if you're restoring user data, that means you must have also taken a backup. So when are you supposed to take the backup? You're supposed to take the backup here, backup user data before formatting the machine, right? Obviously. So what is that I'm doing here? I'm taking a backup of user data, formatting the machine, installing OS, installing drivers, installing core apps, installing LOB apps, whatever the custom settings that he will ask, we are making sure that all those custom settings are there. Finally, we are making sure the recent or latest patches downloaded from Microsoft installed on that machine, and then you're restoring the user data. So this entire step, if you see this entire thing is in a sequence. You cannot do you cannot restore the user data before even installing the drivers, right? Or you cannot have these patches installed before installing any applications, because say suppose in core apps or LOB apps, if you have office applications here, so it makes sense to install patches after office applications, right? It doesn't make any sense installing patches before our office installation, because in that case it will only install OS patches. It cannot install office or any other Microsoft product patches, right? So it is always preferred to have patches after the applications. Right? So similarly, these are in a sequence. These are in a particular fashion that you are supposed to run. Now, this entire thing can be created as part of SCCM task sequence. So as the name says, SCCM task sequence is nothing but running different tasks in a sequence, right? So when you create an SCCM task sequence, backend you are creating an XML file. That's it. It's a GUI. From the GUI user interface, if you're just selecting, okay, first backup the user data, then do the format. So all that you'll select in a window. I'll show you. Okay. but in the background it is just creating an XML file, and in that XML file it will tell, okay, you're supposed to first do a backup, and then you're supposed to do format, then you're supposed to install so and so operating system like 32-bit or 64-bit operating system, right? You're supposed to install so and so drivers. So all this is part of the task sequence, right? And not only just this, if you think about the complexity what we discussed earlier, like we discussed, like how do you identify which driver is required for which model, right? So in SCM task sequence, what you can do is you can have some conditions there. So you can have a condition saying that, okay, um, identify the manufacturer and model, okay, and if you can have a condition there, if it is Dell, Latitude, and so model, then install these drivers. You'll have some drivers there. If it is something else, if it is HP, then install these drivers. Like that, for every manufacturer and every model, you can keep on writing conditions there in a task sequence. So because of these conditions, what will happen? You can now run this task sequence universally on any hardware model. You don't need to run this onto a specific hardware model. You can just run on universally, like if you have 100 machines, just run this task sequence. It is task sequence responsibility now to identify what is the hardware of that particular machine. It will go and check the hardware of that particular machine, and then accordingly it will install the drivers that you asked it to install, right? So thereby one complexity is down. We discussed about that complexity, right? And then the other complexity, we talked about applications, LOB applications. Okay, let me put this is for drivers. So we talked about LOB applications, and what is the complexity we discussed here? Like if a particular department requires SAP, somebody requires remedy tool ticket, remedy ticketing tool, and somebody requires you know AutoCAD. So how does we identify and install? So manually when you're doing, it could be a little bit error prone and a little bit complex, right? So what you can do here is, again, you will go with some condition. Here you will say, okay, there are something called variables. We'll get into that later, but to make it a very clear understanding, like you can say, okay, check for the OU, right? To under which OU this particular machine belongs to. Maybe based on OU you can define, or check for the default gateway. So based on the default gateway, you can install certain things, right? Or check for the department, and based on that, you can have that if the machine belongs to IT infra user, install remedy. So this way, what it will do is, you based on your conditions, now you can install, you can run this SCM task sequence across any department, not only across any hardware model now, you can also run just one single task sequence across any department, and it is again SCCM's task sequence responsibility to identify to which department the user belongs to, and accordingly install whatever applications you asked it to install. Right, guys? So here also that kind of complexity is being taken care by SCM task sequence. Similarly, the other complexity we discussed about is the user data backup, right? So for user data backup, there's something called USMT, User State Migration Tool. So this User State Migration Toolkit, right? uh, You can have that as part of SCM task sequence, and what it will do is you can configure it. It has again some XML files, so you can configure it saying that, okay, take backup of anything which is under user profile. So that is by default, right? So anything which is under user profile, like it could be under his documents, desktop, or anywhere, like my pictures, my videos, or whatever. So anything which is under his profile, his or her profile, so take a backup of that. Or I can make it a little bit, I can write some exclusion thing, exclude dot JPG files, or exclude dot MP3, or exclude dot AVIs. So anything which I think the videos and photos that by default you assume that videos and photos are not part of the corporate data. Those are something it must be personal data, and most of the times that is where a lot of space will go. If you are just copying everything which is in user profile, users might have their personal videos, their personal photos, right? Whatever they have taken, they must have just let it be there on their desktop, right? So such kind of data you don't want it to migrate as part of your corporate migration from 7 to 10, right? You don't want that there. So some exclusion policies you can write. Similarly, you can write sometimes what will happen on a particular machine, um, there will be more than one user profile, like so somebody else was also logging into that machine earlier, or maybe whenever any help desk guys want to fix some problem, they'll log into that machine and they'll fix it and they leave, but their profile is created on that machine. You don't want to copy all these profiles to your latest operating system. You just want the actual profile of the actual user, right? So what you can do, you can have an exclusion policy again there. You'll say, okay, um, only take backup of the user who is logged uh, in less than 30 days, right? So that way all the old accounts that are lying on your machine will not be captured and will not be restored back. So this way there is so much of user data customization can be done, right? I can also give you one more thing. Like for example, some users will store their PDFs or documents which are corporate data. Let's assume it's a corporate data and you have some documents and PDF files. They don't just copy it under the desktop. Sometimes they'll have under D drive, they'll create their own name and put all their data there, right? Or they'll just spread across C drive, D drive, wherever it is, right? So in that case, what you can say, include dot docx and wherever it is, not only just under C drive or C profiles, on the entire machine, wherever you find .docx files, capture them, right? So such kind of uh, customization can be done as part of the user data backup in a restore, and then have that as part of the SCM task sequence, right? So as part of SCM task sequence, it will first run this USMT, it will take a backup, and it will store that way. It should store all this data. You're taking a backup, okay, you have all these policies, conditions, everything great, but where is this data being stored? So for that, SCM will have something called state migration point, SMP, state migration point. So it will copy all this data onto a state migration point, keep it there secured, and after this entire process what we discussed here, the task sequence will do format, OS, drivers, everything is done. Finally, while restore user data, it will again talk to this state migration point. It will tell, okay, I have a user data backup with you. Can you please give it to me? So then the data will go fly back to the local client machine. It will restore the data. So whatever you have taken backup, based on that, you'll get all the data back onto the end user machine. Say suppose during this process, if anywhere it fails, it breaks, the operating system deployment fails, right? Even then, your user data is safe and secure on the state migration point. So there's no issues. You can still build the machine once again, and the day you can restore the data back, right? So unless if you have the machine, if you have the data on the same machine and you are trying to, do OS deployment, there are chances if it is a failure, you missing the entire data. But here what we are doing, we are copying it safely onto a state migration point, building the entire machine and then restoring it back. So even if something happens, the data is still intact, right guys? So such kind of complexities can be taken care when you are talking about SCM task sequence, right? And the kind of task sequence what Amar was saying, we typically call that as post-installation task sequences. So what will happen in post-installation task sequencer? You already have run a task sequence which is already installed, the core apps, LOB apps, custom settings, even antivirus agents, SCM client agents. So all of them are installed as part of this task sequence. But say suppose if some of the applications are missing, or you want to have this some of the applications very specifically installed only after the OS is completed, right? So what you can do, you can bundle them together. All these applications, you can bundle them together into one task sequence. Okay, name it as a post-installation task sequence and run it after the entire deployment is completed. Right? You can then run this task sequence, so it will make sure the other steps are installed. So typically why they will do it is, say suppose once the entire OSD is completed, the help desk guy or the local L1 or L2 guy, if he has to do some steps manually onto that machine, So they'll keep this post installation task sequence aside. They'll first run the OSD. After that, they will do their manual steps, what and all they have to do. Like, and once that is done, then they will run the post installation task sequence to proceed further with the final settings. And then they'll give it to the hand it over to the end user, right? So, guys, any questions till now? Right, starting right from the beginning. Do you have any questions?
No from my end.
Manoj,
Yeah, Manju.
I have a question. 1 minute.
Mhm. Looks like Manju sits in between two radio station towers.
No, there was slightly.
No, no, I am just kidding with
There was slightly, yeah. So disturbance, so it is closing up. Actually, I have a question here. Under LOB apps, there are different applications which has a license, which is a license or non-license. So how about a license application will be managed here? Because different the license will be something like some example. If I take AutoCAD, some application will have a floating license and a non-floating license. So how that will be able to manage here while capturing?
See, if you have a per device license, okay, if you have a per device license, then you can go ahead and put them in the as part of the task sequence, right? Some of the licenses are like, as you rightly said, AutoCAD, or sometimes what we'll do is it is based on the concurrent uses, the concurrent users. You can have it on a terminal server, AutoCAD, and then based on the number of concurrent users at that point of time, how many people are using it, that's how some of the applications are licensed, right? So for such applications, we cannot have them as part of the task sequence, but anything which is per device license, so the license is consumed based of per device, then you can definitely have them here. And kind of if one user is not using it, you want to uninstall and make it use for the other guy, something like that, that can still be done using your any other license management software, right? So here our scope of SCCM is only to install that licensed application onto the end user device, and later managing the particular license, like doing a software harvesting. What we say harvesting is like removing that license for one user and using the same license for other user based on their uses. So that can be always done through a license management software, but not from SCCM at this point. Did I answer your question, Manju?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, guys? Okay. So for your understanding, SCM task sequence can be considered as something like your package or your application. So you can relate this to task sequence. So task sequence is nothing but it's just like your package or application. How you create a package or application. Now you know how to create a package and application. You right click, say create a package, and then you give some kind of source files, some kind of checkboxes, settings and all that, and finally you create an application package. Similarly for application, you have deployment types, then you have requirements, supersedence, dependencies, this, that, and finally you create an application, right? So similarly, even in task sequence, just right click, say create task sequence, and then within the task sequence you'll put what operating system it has to install, what drivers it has to install, what are the conditions to install, what are the core applications. So all that put together, your task sequence is ready. Now finally, how you do it? If you want to deploy, you deploy into a collection, right? So the same goes here as well. Even in task sequence, once the task sequence is done, you have to deploy to a collection, just like how you deploy a package or application, right? So the collection will have the set of computers. In this case, OSD, you're not pushing it to the group of users, right? You're pushing it to the group of computers. That's how you do it. Now, guys, see, today being the very first session, I'm trying to go as much theoretical and trying to give you the the ground level information, the basic ground level information to understand, okay, these are the basic rules, like these are the task sequences, this is how the process flows in the background. So that once you're thorough with that, then when I go to the next session and take you through those creating drivers, driver packages, so you'll be able to understand, you'll be able to correlate it, right? So before we go into the next thing, so what are the different ways of deployments? So when I say deployments, so I'll tell you one, like fresh installation, like there is nothing, no operating system, nothing on a machine. We call them as a bare metal. So on a bare metal machine, installing operating system is a fresh installation. So what are the other ways? Can I consider upgrade as one?
High,
Go ahead.
high touch, low touch, and zero touch.
Okay, that will go a little bit later. Yeah, that also will touch upon. So I'm asking like,
So
yeah.
in high touch, basically it's manual installation.
No, Amar. So I'm going to touch on the
Okay.
LTA, JTI a little later. I'm asking in
Okay.
deployments, like you have fresh or bare metal installation, then you have upgrade, right? You can directly upgrade from a Windows 7 machine or Windows 8 machine to Windows 10, right? You're upgrading from an older operating system, new operating system. So that's another kind of deployment. So there's no OS here. Existing to latest operating system, for example, Windows 10, right? So you're upgrading here. So when we say upgrade, what does that mean? You don't need to take a user data backup and restore user data backup, because when you're upgrading, it is the same machine. It is not formatting, only it is upgrading the Windows files, right? It might be creating the existing OS Windows files will go under Windows.old folder directory, and it will create a new Windows directory, and it will start copying all these Windows 10 files there. So it is upgrading your machine. So you don't need to install the applications again. You don't need to install the take a user data backup and restore, right? Just in case if those applications are not compatible with Windows 10, they will fail. That's a different thing. But you're not actually taking any backups or installing the applications, or most of the times you're not even installing the drivers. Sometimes yes, maybe after the new operating system upgrade, some of the drivers needs to be installed, right? So this is one process, upgrade. The other process is refresh scenario, which we just talked about. This scenario here is a refresh scenario. Refresh scenario in the sense you got the older machine with all the user data and everything. So what you're doing here is you're completely formatting and putting the data back here. So let me put this way. So refresh is the complete cycle, whereas since bare metal, there's no OS, so there is no user backup and there's no restore data. Okay, this is what in the bare metal. Whereas in upgrade, there's no formatting, there's no user data, there's no restore data, and even the drivers and core apps and LOB apps, most of the things are already there. If something is missing, only then these three things will happen. So it is kind of an optional thing. What you're doing here, these three are optional. Based on what are missing, you'll install the drivers. What are missing, you'll install the applications. Otherwise, it is just upgrading to the latest operating system. If there are any custom settings related to the Windows 10 latest operating, you'll install the custom settings, install patches. That's it. That finishes the in upgrade. Whereas in refresh, right from backup till restore, each and every step is required, because the user has just dropped his laptop with you, and tomorrow morning he comes, he takes the laptop back. So you have to give him a Windows 10 machine with the entire his user data, new applications and everything. So that's refresh. Now there's one more scenario called replace. Can you guys guess what this could be? Anyone? You must have seen this multiple times. Replace in your corporate environment. Okay, say suppose you have old laptop with you and they're giving you a new laptop, right? So what you will do here, on the old laptop you'll do a backup user data, and on the new laptop you'll go from here to there. So you're taking the backup of the data on the old laptop. That's all you do. On the new laptop, you're actually formatting it. So on the old laptop, what you can also do is you can format this machine so that it can be given to other users, right? But just like this is just for the safety purpose. Otherwise, just backing up the user data is the only process which will run on the old laptop. On the new laptop, what you're doing is you're formatting the new laptop, and all these steps are common. And finally, you're restoring data what is backed up from the old laptop. So basically what will happen when you're backing up from old laptop, I'm talking about putting it onto an SMP server. So when you're restoring data, SCM should understand that its data has been backed up by an old laptop and not from the same laptop, right? It has to understand that. It'll go to the state migration point, find the old laptop's data there and restore here. So this scenario is called replay scenario. Yes, are you clear here what I'm trying to say?
Yes, Manohar. Good.
Okay, okay. So these are the different scenarios. One is fresh bare metal. There is no operating system. You have to write from formatting till patches. There is no user data involved here. Second, upgrade. Your existing OS, Windows 7 or Windows 8, and you are upgrading to Windows 10. So since you're upgrading it, you don't need to take backup of user data. You don't need to format the machine. Just install OS. Whatever is missing, if drivers are missing or applications are missing or custom settings are missing, accordingly you will install those. And finally you will install patches. Refresh scenario end to end. Replay scenario, take the backup piece on the old laptop and rest everything is will happen on the new laptop. So typically these are the different kinds of scenarios. In any organization you go, these are the different kind of scenarios. So when you are having a discussion with your customer, with your client, somebody comes to you and your client comes to you and say that we wanted to have an operating system deployment solution to migrate to Windows 10. So the first question you'll ask them is, okay, what are the different kinds of deployment methods that you wanted to do? So, okay, do you have any, all of them are bare metals, or are you looking for an upgrade scenario, or you're looking for any replace or refresh? So what kind of scenarios are there? So then he'll come up with all kinds of deployment scenarios that they have. Accordingly, you can create a solution because each one of them is a different scenario altogether, right? So accordingly, you need to tweak the task sequence. Task sequence should understand whether this is an upgrade or bare metal or refresh. Accordingly, it has to do appropriate action. So it should not, on a upgrade scenario, you should not take a user backup. So, and it should not format the machine. So task sequence should understand that this is an upgrade scenario. So accordingly, you have to put all those conditions in there, right? So first collect this deployment scenario information from your customer. Now we will talk about the LTI versus JTI. Go ahead, Amar. What is light touch installation and what is zero touch installation?
Light touch is one wherein we would require little, uh, wherein little actions are required, like pressing the F1 key or during the deployment. The zero touch is where there is no intervention at all, and it's a zero touch.
Yes, you're right. And you're saying something like HDI as well. So what's that?
That's where when the installation is the entire operating system installation requires a physical presence of a person during the installation.
So which is called as high touch installation, right?
High touch, yeah.
So you're right. Thanks, Amar. Thanks for that. So basically what happens here is during the installation, so that once you have defined your scenario, you know I'm going to do a particular scenario, right? I'm going to do all refresh scenarios. Fine, great. Now during the installation, there will be multiple wizards, multiple screens, multiple windows will come up, right? So whether you want those windows to be shown to the end user and requires end users inputs or some kind of interaction, right? In that case, it becomes a light touch installation. Okay, because you're asking the end user to input something there. For example, you're asking him to input the time zone. So after the operating system is installed, immediately it gives you a pop-up saying that, okay, what's your time zone? Okay, so the user is selecting his time zone. Similarly, you'll ask him, okay, what is the language that you wanted to have on this machine, right? So those are the default things, like the regional settings, local settings, or those are the things which user is prompted by default. The operating system itself will pops up few things. The SCCM itself will pop up few things, right? Based on that, if the user is providing all those details, it is called light touch installation, right? When you're saying zero touch installation, so the name itself says, so all these wizard screens will automatically understand, okay, this guy is from France, this machine is in France. That means he's in so and so time zone, and he requires French as a language pack. So it should understand, the SSM should be smart enough to understand which location this machine is being built, and accordingly install the exact language pack to him, and set the machine into a proper time zone. So this is just an example. Not only time zone, there are multiple other things. Okay, not only just language book, there are multiple other things. So the moment you're making completely automated, it is called zero touch installation. And any wizard screen, if the user requires to give some inputs, it is a light touch installation. It could be user or some help desk guy, whoever is building the machine, right? Now, apart from this, there are a couple more scenarios. One is the HTI, high touch, so which typically we don't do it from SCCM, because then there is, the purpose is defeated, right? If you're doing a high touch or heavy touch kind of installation, the purpose is defeated, wherein you're asking one guy to sit completely over there while it's building, because during like right from hitting the F12, right, and after that each and every screen that it comes, not only the default screens which comes from the operating system, so each and every screen he has to keep on installing, he has to keep on pressing yes, and maybe sometimes even the task sequence will pause and he has to install something again there manually. He has to run a few scripts, or he has to run do few settings there, and after that again the task sequence will resume after his manual activities are done. So that is kind of a heavy touch or high touch. So why do you want to go to a heavy touch or high touch through SCCM? So that is actually defeating the purpose. Unless until it is really mandatory and something which cannot be automated as part of task sequence, then yes, okay. If there is no other way, then okay, we go with a high touch installation. Now there is one more thing which is called as UDI. Have you ever heard about this UDI? Any one of you? Or I'll tell the full name. It is called a user driven installation. Have you heard of this? No?
No.
Okay.
I've heard, but I've not used it.
Okay, cool. So user-driven installation are like, see, when we are talking about LTI, I'll tell there is a slight difference between all of these. So if you don't understand properly, then it'll be a problem. So light touch installation, what you're doing, the default screens, whatever comes with the default, right? The default screens are coming here, and like the time zone is a default screen. Whenever, even if you install through your CD DVD, you'll get the time zone screen, right? So the default screens, when they're coming up and you're asking for the user input, that is LTA. User driven installation is something which is like, which is customized screens. Those are customized screens for your environment. Like you'll ask him uh, to which OU this machine should be added. So you'll give him a drop-down box to the end user saying that, okay, your machine will be added to the domain. However, which OU you want? Is it France? Is it Germany? Based on the country, or it could be desktops, laptops. Okay, based on which model you're using, right? Or maybe based on your department, HR, finance, right? So you would give him a drop-down box. So during the installation, it will give you a one HTA screen, right? And in that wizard, you are giving a drop-down box for him and asking him to select which OU he belongs to, so that that particular OU is installed. Similarly, it could be not only the OU, even the language pack, right? So which language pack you want? For example, in Quebec or Canada, there will be people who will be speaking both, who will be using English as their language pack. They will also have French as their language pack. Okay, and there are some countries, there will be people who will be using Spanish as well. So you cannot just define based on the country that they will be only using French if it is France. No, maybe that particular country will have even French, there are Spanish speaking people, there are English speaking people as well. So then you need to give that the control to the end user. So something which cannot be automated based on any particular factor, it is not standardized. Then what you need to do is, since it is not standardized, you have to give the control to the end user for him to automatically select from a drop-down box, right? So if you're giving such kind of wizard, such kind of screens, so you have to create these screens as part of Sccm UDI wizard. There is a UDI designer is there. So using that, you'll create these screens. You'll tell, okay, if anybody is asking for OU, you put this drop-down box, let them select one of these OU, right? So if that is the case, it is called user-driven installation. Guys, am I clear here? Okay. And this UDA, I can give one more example, like the applications, right? So we were discussing about Remedy application or AutoCAD and SAP kind of applications. So what people can also do is, since say suppose there is no particular standard way to identify which user requires which application, maybe it is not standardized. So automatic, you can make anything automated only when in the background it is standardized. If there is something, some reference point, based on that you can automate it. If somebody else tells you, like anybody who is part of this OU, they'll get only this application. If such kind of standardization is there in the organization, it is very easier for you as part of automation to read that particular OU and install certain applications, right? So in the backend itself, there's no standardization, you cannot automate anything. In such cases, what you'll do, you'll give a user-driven installation and you'll tell them, okay, these are the set of applications, LOB applications. Now you select which LOB application you want and I will install it. So as part of this installation process, you'll get a screen saying that select one or more of the applications below, and he'll have AutoCAD, BMC Remedy, SAP, and everything listed down. User will select what and all application he wants, and accordingly he will get those applications. Right? So this is user-driven installation, UDI. Is it clear, guys?
Yeah, somewhat indirectly or directly, we will be given most of the control at the user end itself. So,
Yes, yes. So you see this, you need to be very clear at this part. So at least for the interview process. So most of the interviews, they will definitely ask you this question when it is going to the OSD. They'll ask what is the difference between LTA, JTA, and UDA. Maybe HTA, few people might ask, few people may not, but LTA, JTA, and UDA, people will ask. So just understand the difference between these, all this. So light touch installation is the default screens wherever the user input is required. That is called light touch installation. Heavy touch installation or high touch installation is something wherein one person needs to sit there and he has to go through each and every screen it comes. He has to give the information there. Not only just that, sometimes he might even need to, when the task sequence he pauses, he need to run some settings or he need to make some changes onto that machine, right? And then resume the task sequence to proceed further. So that is high touch or heavy touch installation. And then UDI installation, anything which cannot be automated, that can be given, the control can be given to the end user by having some user driven screens. So in those screens you can give a couple of examples like adding machine to OUs or installing LOB applications, right? So certain screens can be created for the end user so that he himself can select what he wants and proceed further. Finally, JTI, as its name says, zero touch installation, no user interaction is required. End to end, everything is automated, and just the moment the machine is connected to the network, you just need to leave it for 1 hour or 1.5 hours, and by the end of the time, the machine is built with all the drivers, specific applications, user data backed up, everything done end to end. So that is zero touch installation, right, guys? So most of the times, customer would ask for zero touch or near zero touch kind of installation. That's what most of the times customer would ask, because they cannot afford to have floor workers or multiple resources at their remote locations, right? So everywhere they cannot have floor workers to install, to initiate the installation or to keep on pressing those um, screens, right? Now,
No, one question.
sure, Anil, sure. Sorry, I've overlooked your hand. Yeah.
Yeah, not. So like if you say UDI or a JTI, when we are doing this installation, like how it's creating the SSM, how much intelligent it's working, like creating a host name and creating an object into the AD.
So you're saying how things happen in the background when you're doing domain join or giving a host name.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what will happen here is like the host name. Again, giving a computer name is there are multiple ways. Some people like they will ask, we need to have a standard format like, for example, the machine is in Bangalore, right? I need to have the country code IN, then Bangalore BLR, and then I need to identify whether this machine is desktop or laptop. If it is laptop, LT, and then finally I need to have a serial number. Whatever is the serial number of this machine, that needs to be there in the last four digits or 6 digits. So based on the requirement from the customer, what you'll do as part of the task sequence, you'll have a script to do this. So Sccm by default will not have the kind of the different kinds of requirements that your customer will ask, the naming convention. All those different kinds of customization will not be there by default in Sccm. So what you'll do, you'll create a script to identify to which location he belongs to and all that, and you'll run that script as part of the task sequence. That's one thing what you can do to host to have the host name, right? If it is pretty straightforward, like just have the asset tag or just have the serial number, if it is that straightforward, yes, SCM can do that. You can put a percentage serial number percentage in the place of host name, right? But if it is more complex, then yes, you need to go for a script there. So that is regarding host name. Regarding adding the machine to a domain, so it's a default step in the task sequence saying that in the background there is something called djoin.exe or netdom.exe which will run, which will join this machine to the exact domain, and in the task sequence you can give the OU to which it has to join. So it is actually connecting to your Active Directory and it is running with the domain join account. You need to specify an account in the task sequence saying that okay, run with this particular credentials, add this machine to the domain, add this machine to the particular OU, right? In the background, that particular exe will run, which is responsible for adding this machine to OU and to the domain. But when you do it practically, right, you'll understand it much better. But just to give you an overview, yes, we can do the host name through, if it is direct, you can give it in the task sequence. If it is a little bit complex, you need to have a script for that. And adding the machine is a default, or adding a machine to joining a machine to domain is a default step in the task sequence. Yeah, and you need to give a separate credentials for that, username and password. Make sense?
Okay. Yes.
Any other questions, guys? Okay. So, so I know today you guys are not getting a chance to view the SCM console, but as I told you, this being a very big topic, there are so many things to be covered theoretically first before we get into the practical stuff. Okay, so let me go to the next step, which is a little bit of image engineering, or how do you capture an image. So can anyone tell me how to capture an image, or have you ever captured an image, created an image? Or even if you heard from someone how to create an image.
I did it from thin clients, not for the desktop.
Okay, so thin clients, how did you do that? Just the process, if you can tell the high level process.
Yeah, yeah, from the pen drive. There will be inbuilt some kind of a patch already prepared in the pen drive, captured with using the pen drive capturing procedure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. Others, have you ever captured an image? Sai, you got a new headset, right? Earlier you were not talking because of the mic problem. Now you have a headset, boss. You have to talk.
Yeah, but I see the picture is clear. So let me complete the lab session.
Okay, okay, okay. No, at least have you ever worked on a capturing an image?
No, Manohar.
Okay, okay, no issues. So let's take it from here then. Let's assume you have a reference image, reference machine. When I say reference machine, that machine is just a virtual machine. You have a virtual machine on which you have Windows 10 operating system installed. Okay. So what you'll do to build a reference machine, you'll have a new VM, right? And you will have Windows 10 OS installed on that, right? So now on this machine, what you'll do is in Sccm you have something called build and capture task sequence. So what you can do is you can have either the operating system, or even if you don't have operating system, even if this part is not there also, still the build and capture task sequence will itself install OS. It is installing OS from where? From the ISO. It will take a CD DVD. You will have that ISO file and SCM task sequence. Using the ISO file, it will install this machine, and then after installing, what you can put in build and capture task sequences, you can have the OS install plus any apps if you want, some core applications, right? As I told, the .NET Framework, Silverlight, those are core apps. So let me have the core apps inside this. Plus if you have some custom settings, let me have the custom settings inside. So finally, I want to capture the image. So this is a task sequence which is doing, right? You are just running the task sequence on a brand new VM. So what it is doing, it is installing the operating system based on the ISO file. It doesn't have Vim anything. So till now you don't have a Vim file. Just based on the ISO, it is installing the operating system. After installing operating system, it is installing the core applications. And after that, it is installing some custom settings. Finally, it is capturing. So when it captures, you will get a capture.vim file. Now in this Vim file, you have OS, you have application, core applications, you have custom settings. All of them are part of the Vim file. Now on the target machine, what you do, so suppose this is another new VM, or it can be a physical laptop. This machine, you're running deployment task sequence. So there you run build and capture task sequence. Here you are running deployment task sequence. So what this deployment task sequence will do, it will first install the capture.vim file. So the output from reference machine is the input for the target machine. So first you are installing capture.vim file, applying rather than installing. We call it as applying a Vim file. So you have applied the Vim file. So now since you have applied Vim file, already you got OS, core application, custom settings. So what are left over now? Left over are drivers for the specific model, LOB apps, and since custom settings and everything are done, even here you can have patches, right? So since everything is done there, only specific drivers, LOB apps are installed here. So this way, the target machine will now have Windows 10 deployed. Right guys, is this clear? So how do you capture the Vim file? You'll have a reference machine. On that, you'll run a build and capture task sequence. So it will first install the OS from the ISO, and then you can install core applications, custom settings, patches. Finally, the task sequence will capture that and create a capture.vim file, right? Now you will go to the target machine, you'll run a deployment task sequence, and in that deployment task sequence, the output from the first task sequence, build and capture, whatever the output you're getting from there, that is the capture.vim file. You'll install that first, and on top of it, you'll install drivers, and if there are any specific LOB applications. So that way your Windows 10 is deployed with the standard settings and everything. Right guys? Now, what you can have in this Vim file is what we call as thin versus thick image. Have you heard of this? Thin image, thick image?
Yes, Manoj.
So, so go ahead. Can you tell me what will be there in thin and what will be there in thick?
In a thin image, it would be just the operating system and the core apps. A thick image is one which has most of the, uh, uh, apart from the core apps, there would be certain LOB apps also installed. That would be a thick image.
Okay. So which one do you prefer? You prefer thin image or thick image?
A thin image is good when we are deploying it through network. That utilizes less bandwidth.
Okay. Cool. So Yeah, so as Amma said, so the first thing is like thin image. What you'll have is you'll make sure that the image is size is as much less as possible. That means you'll just have the operating system. Sometimes you'll not even have the core applications. So what you'll have is you'll just have the patches here, okay, to make it as much thin as possible. So in that image, you'll just have the OS and patches. So while you're capturing here, right? So you'll not have core apps, you'll remove these custom settings, everything, just OS plus patches, you'll create a capture vim file. So that is called thin image, right? The other part is thick image. So in thick image, what you're trying to do is trying to put as much as things possible in the image itself so that when you're actually deploying it, it will be much faster. In another sense, like when you're just applying that image, what happens is first the image is applied. So already OS, apps, custom settings, patches, everything is built in that. So thereby the task sequence will complete a little bit faster, right? So thick image is one way is beneficial when you're talking about the time. But now what will happen is think about servicing the image. So the biggest problem here is every now and then you need to uh, every quarter maybe or every half yearly, what you'll do, you have to keep on updating your image. Okay, so when I say servicing the image, it's like in that image sometimes you require the patches to be upgraded, the patches to be installed. Sometimes if it has Adobe Flash Player X version and now Adobe Flash Player a newer version is there, so whenever you're deploying any machine using this image, you don't want them to get the older Adobe Flash Player, you want them to get the latest Flash Player, right? So what you'll do, you have to remove that Flash Player, older Flash Player from the image and install put a newer Flash Player. So when you're talking about thick image, so since it will have so many components inside it, and the chances of upgrading, the chance of changing will become more frequent. Most of the things you need to keep on changing within the image. Whereas in thin image, just because it has only OS and patches, the frequency of updation will reduce. So you don't need to frequently service the image because all the other things will be coming as part of task sequence. Only in the task sequence you will select which application needs to be installed and which is not required. That is part of task sequence. In the image you will have only OS and patches. So that way managing it, right, or servicing the image will be easier when compared to thin versus thick. Is this point clear, guys? Or you want me to give any example here? Okay. So yeah, Manju.
Yeah, you can give an example.
Okay, let me give one quick example. So I'll go with the same Flash Player 10 is in thin image, right? Sorry, is in thick image. And similarly, you have Flash Player 10 and you have, give me one more application like .NET Framework or, you know, uh, if you have .NET, not .NET Framework, give me any other example which the application will be keep on changing, like Adobe Reader, for example. Okay, so if you have these two applications in as part of thick image, so what you have to do is, suppose this image is created in May 2017. Okay, now in the month of October 2017, okay, if you're looking in the month of October 2017, what will happen is there are so many things which are upgraded in the meanwhile. Microsoft must have released so many patches. Adobe might have released so many latest versions of Flash Player and Reader. So what you need to do is you have to service this image. This image is no more useful in the month of October. By then there are so many changes which happened. So what you need to do is you have to service the image. So you have to open that image and remove this Flash Player, Adobe Reader, and put something with the latest versions. Whereas in thin image, if you see, there's nothing in the thin image, only the OS plus patches. So all you need to do is you have to install latest patches. All you need to do is in the month of October, you have to install only the latest patches into this image. Whereas in this, you have to install the latest patches, remove the older applications and install the newer applications. So this way, what will happen? And you cannot even wait till October 2017. You have to do it again in the month of July You have to do it in the month of August, because there are frequent updates which are happening with respect to these applications. There might be some 10 applications. So with respect to these applications, there are so many changes which are happening. So every time you have to keep on opening this image and make some changes to it, add the new application and remove old. Whereas for thin image, only thing is you have to keep on adding patches. That's the only thing you have to do. So that way, servicing image, thin image is easier when compared to thick image. Manju, make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Fine, guys. So I think most of the concepts have been covered. Yep, I guess most of the concepts are covered, at least theoretically, and we are good to jump on to the practical session. So today I'll just take you an overview in the console where exactly we do all this stuff. So under software library, you have operating systems. So the first thing what you need to do is operating system image, right? So you'll create an operating system image here. So even before capturing a Vim file, you need to have an ISO file, right? So when you right click, you can add operating system image, and here it is only accepting a Vim file. It is not accepting an ISO, right? So what you can do is you can either use a Vim file which comes by default. Nowadays in all the operating systems you are getting an install.vim file. You can use that, or else if you have an ISO file, you can also include that as part of an operating system upgrade package, and you can give a path, so it will even take not only Vim file, it can even take an ISO file here. So first of all, you'll have that ISO file. With that ISO file, you're building a machine, and then you're getting a captured Vim file. Then you can use the captured Vim file here as part of operating system image, right? And then the drivers. Second layer is drivers. So this is where you will create the drivers and driver packages. We'll do this. We'll download some drivers for the Dell models and we'll install them. And what else? Task sequence. So this is going to have your drivers, OS, and applications and other things. Anyways, you have them under application management, right? It is the same applications. Whatever you create here, you can just call them as part of the task sequence, right, guys? And what are the other things? Custom settings. Again, custom settings are applications. Custom settings are nothing but you're creating scripts, some VB scripts, and calling them as part of task sequence. What else is here, buddy? So boot images. So by default, Sccm will come with two boot images, 32-bit and 64-bit boot image. So based on the kind of operating system that you're building. So if you're building a 64-bit Windows 10 machine, you'll use a 64-bit boot image, right? Or if you're building a 32-bit Windows 10 machine, you'll use a 32-bit boot image. So accordingly, you'll use these boot images to start the process, right?
It
So,
captures your service pack also.
sorry,
Is it captures service pack also?
does it capture a service pack?
Yes.
Yeah, see, when you have on a reference machine, whatever you have on a reference machine, if you have, if the reference machine is service pack 1, service pack 2, whatever it is, so whatever is the operating system lying on that reference machine, everything will be captured. Okay, so that's what I was thinking. Should I start the operating system deployment now or not? We just left over with 10 minutes.
No, we can do it tomorrow. We again. Uh, uh,
So if you have any questions on the theory part, I'll be happy to answer so that tomorrow we can start with the actual practical session.
Manohar, when you talked about keeping the ISO file or the Vim file, where is the source located? Will it be on the local machine or is it on any specific DB?
Uh,
How does it?
Amar, could you please repeat the question? I didn't get that.
Yeah. So in the SCCM console, you just now showed how an operating system upgrade package and the Vim file can be selected or chosen. Where is the source exactly? Source in the sense from where does it pick up? Does it only pick up from the local machine and just
So basically what you will do is, say suppose if you have an ISO file, right? So ISO file is there in your CD DVD, right? So what you will do is when you're selecting this initial one, which is operating system upgrade package or the ISO. So what you'll do is you can have that on your local machine on the site server itself. You can have that CD DVD and you can give that. Or else if you have on a UNC path, if you have that ISO file, directly you can give that path. That's what happens here. But once you are capturing it, so once the capture process is completed, where will build and capture task sequence will store? So it will store the task sequence will store it on again on the site server where you're doing it, right? So you can give a location, or else if you want to store this capture.vim file on a particular server, right? Definitely it will not be there on the end machine. That means it will not be there on the VM, the reference machine or target machine. That's not it is going to be. It will be either on a file server where you have captured that Vim file, or it will be on your site server, right? These are the only two possibilities, on the site server or any other file server where you give the UNC path. Make sense?
Yeah, okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Now, coming to the log file, do we have any log file for this?
Log file in the operating system deployments.
No, yes. When we push the operating system, does it?
Yeah. There are so many log files. So in the operating system deployment, right from creating the capturing the Vim file, right, and pushing it. The main one log file which most of the people will talk about is SMSTS, SMS task sequence dot log file. So that's the main log file. But apart from that, there are multiple log files you need to check during the whole process.
Okay. So, can you show us the path, please?
Yeah, definitely. But since we haven't started the practical thing, so so once we start it, right? So just like how I'm showing you the exec manager, app enforce log file and all that. So when I start the process, when I run the task sequence, then in the background we'll monitor that using log files, how it is happening and all that.
Okay.
So not only log files
Yes.
for tasks for this operating system deployments, you have so many reports as well. So yesterday we have built the reporting base. You guys were not there, so now since we have built this reporting base, you will have reports even for the operating system deployments. You see here, you have task sequence deployment status, right? Different reports are this. Status of a specific task sequence deployment for a specific computer. This is the most commonly used report. So you will give the specific task sequence, and on a specific computer you wanted to know what's happening. So where is it failing, or what is the stage it is? Is it formatting, or is it installing LOB applications? So where is it exactly? What is it doing? So you will always run this particular report. So either you can run these reports, or else you can go to the SMSTS log. So that I will show when practically we are building. So what I'll do in these practical sessions, since I have this machine here, right? So I have a test01, right? So I will capture the Windows 7 image from this test01. I'll create one more new VM called test02, and I'll deploy it on that machine, and I'll show you how the network boot will happen and how the other machine will get the operating system image. Similarly, if you want, I can even do the same thing for Windows 10 as well. I can capture a Windows 10 image and deploy it onto another machine, or upgrade this machine from Windows 7 to Windows 10. Or else if you have some user data, taking a backup and restoring it. So what kind of scenario you would be interested? Based on that, we'll use our time to cover as many scenarios as possible and show it to you. Because typically OS deployment, it will take like minimum 2 hours once we trigger it. So maybe we cannot have multiple scenarios discussed in a particular day. So what we can do is, if you come up with any scenario that you think it is difficult, so I can show that scenario. At least we can trigger it, and I'll have the recording run. So maybe you'll at least have that entire OSD completed in the recording. Right, guys? So if you don't have any further questions for today, so we'll wind up for today, and hey, wait a minute. So today is 26th, right? 26th is Friday. So we'll have a session tomorrow, 27th, but on 29th, I'll not be available. So on 29th morning, we don't have a session. Hope that is okay with you guys. So tomorrow we have a session. Saturday we have a session, but Monday we'll not be having any session. Is that okay?
Yeah, man.
Okay. Cool, guys. Fine then. Let's meet tomorrow morning, guys. Take care.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Just a minute. Have you all dropped off?
No,